So, how do you go all in on your biggest goals without taking on so much risk that you set yourself up for failure? Well, the truth is, it's not actually about working harder. It's about making smarter decisions. And that brings us to today's masterclass, where we're diving into systems. Specifically, we're going to talk about using decision strategy as a productivity tool. We'll cover mental models that stack the odds in your favor, how to reduce wasted time, and help you achieve your goals with less stress, less effort, and less risk. I'm very excited to introduce today's special guest, Dr. Todd Snyder. Todd is an executive coach, psychologist, and the founder of Shifting Tides. He's known as the far-sighted entrepreneur, and he's laser focused on one thing: helping business owners take back control of their time in an age full of overwhelm and distraction. Todd holds a doctorate in psychology and neuroscience. He uses that background to help entrepreneurs collapse time and multiply their results. He doesn't offer generic tips. He provides clear mental models and helps leaders make far-sighted decisions that eliminate wasted effort before it even starts. He's helped clients double their revenue targets in just a matter of months by restructuring how they focus their energy. He knows how to solve the root cause of overwhelm. He builds clarity, and that is why his system works. So with that, I would like to officially welcome to Sellmore Academy, Dr. Todd Snyder. Todd, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. Please feel free to tell us a little bit about your journey and anything that I messed up or missed along the way, please.
That's excellent. Thank you, Ben, for that fun introduction. And yeah, I'd say you captured it pretty well. And so, yeah, it's terms of how I came to do the work that I'm doing. Was that the nature, the core of your question?
Yeah. Kind of how did you get here? How do we end up here?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I came into the United States from Rwanda, Africa, where I lived till I was about 14 years old. Um, and we were way out in the middle of nowhere. My dad has a PhD in aquaculture, and he was helping people to learn how to farm tilapia in areas where there wasn't enough farmland for some of the young men out there, um, to be able to do the, subsistence farming. And so we were out in the middle of nowhere with no internet. Obviously, there was no internet back then, but no electricity, no radio except the one Rwandan radio station, no TV. And so, we're living on solar panels. I was homeschooled, and then I got dropped into a small farming community in Illinois. It started high school about 3 months after we got to the U.S. And socially, it just kind of knocked me off my feet because going through a little bit of culture shock, even though I'm from the US originally and my parents are from here. It's that experience of being taken out of one culture, dropped into another, hadn't watched the TV shows and those kinds of things that peers were talking about. And so I really struggled, and socially I was like kind of closed down. And then I stumbled across a book in my grandmother's cottage up in Michigan that opened my mind to the world of psychology and just changing the internal narrative that's running in your mind. And it had such a profound effect on me, just allowing me to come out of my shell and connect with people and understand kind of what my own goals were. And such a powerful effect that I thought, I want to learn what this is. I want to be able to help other people with this. And through my more reading, learned like, oh, that's what they call psychology. So I went on to study psychology in college, and then I went on to do a master's degree and doctoral degree in clinical psychology. Went into work in private practice in psychology, but I always had this desire to get back to helping people with motivation and goal setting and essentially living the best life they could. And so I would take on clients for working on things like personal goals and achieving things in business sometimes in personal life. And somebody who was an internet marketer heard me on one of those teleconference type calls where someone had invited me to give some insights about some motivation stuff. And they said, "Hey, could you help people in business with this kind of stuff and help me sort of build a course from that?" And so I worked with him, and then was one thing led to another. Pretty soon I had people calling me for that kind of work. And I gradually realized that entrepreneurs are my people. Like they're working fast, they're sprinting towards goals that are big, and they often have big visions. They're willing to work hard, but there's often those things that hold you back, whether it's distraction or just self-discipline, or if it's just the systems and the overwhelm that prevents you from really achieving your full potential. And so um, I've decided that that's where I really want to focus. So I gradually closed down my clinical work, important, meaningful work, but I found that I could be even more effective working with entrepreneurs. And so I gradually made the shift, and that's what I've been doing full time for many years now, working with entrepreneurs around the world, who are building things, a lot of them in the digital marketing space, or adjacent to that. And we're having fun setting goals and trying to figure out how we can collapse the time that it takes to be able to reach their most ambitious goals.
It's exciting. I have to assume that, and maybe I'm wrong in doing this, but that some of the entrepreneurs that you help, you probably prevent them by helping them from ending up in the clinical side, at least some of them.
There's some truth to that. Yeah, some of the clients I work with have some underlying tendencies, whether in many cases they've already identified that. Some people will say, I have a worry tendency, and that gets flared up. Some people have something more minor, just like a people-pleasing tendency,
Mhm.
that gets in the way of their business goals. And once in a while, someone's aware of like I may not have full bipolar disorder, but I have some trends to have higher energy weeks and months, and then troughs where I just struggle to get myself to be as motivated or to feel as confident. And definitely the stress that entrepreneurs face on a constant basis, is a factor that needs to be taken into consideration if you're going to achieve peak performance as an entrepreneur.
Love that. I love this idea of peak performance too. I know it's become a bit of a trendy thing over the last few years, but what would you say, like, why is this so important now? Why does an entrepreneur need to master decision strategy now more so than ever?
Well, it's partly because we have unlimited decisions. So entrepreneurs, just by nature, face more decision frequency than most people do, but also the impact of those decisions are higher on your life. So it's one thing to show up at a job where a boss tells you, here's your goals for the quarter, and we need you to achieve this, and you have a little bit of leeway in terms of how you accomplish those goals. It's another thing when you show up and before you can even start that work of trying to accomplish the goals and the decisions with that, you have to decide among, 15 different possible projects that you're going to add for your business, or even entire business models that you might pivot to as things change. Right now, as we're going through this rapid transition with AI unfolding in our world, and also just some of the secondary effects of that with entire industries changing in some respects. It's almost tripled from just the conversations I've been having with entrepreneurs, the number of high level decisions, serious potential impact on your bottom line, but also just your career in general. So decision making is something we all do every day. It's just that they're more high impact decisions that are forced onto the entrepreneur before you even start your workday. And what I've noticed is that we tend to make progress at the speed of certainty. So if you feel like you're kind of divided, like we're kind of thinking going this direction, but another part of us, I kind of also want to pursue this other direction. As a result, you have a little bit of an internal civil war going on, and you're kind of getting pulled in two directions. As a result, you go nowhere. And so we try to resolve that as quickly as possible. That's in my process that I go through with entrepreneurs. The first step is, do you even know what you want on a personal level? Because we want to make sure your business goals serve your personal goals as well. And then the next question is, okay, then you know what you want on a personal level, and let's make sure your business goals are aligned with that. Which of these business goals that you're saying, these aspirations you have, do you want to put your whole heart and focus on? And if the entrepreneur doesn't have certainty there, I can usually tell. And they can usually tell as well because they'll say, yeah, I would like to really just double down and stay focused, but I'm in a little bit of a limbo here, or I'm considering this, or I'm spending some of my day dabbling and testing over here. And as I'm sure you know, Ben, and anyone who's listening to this who's worked in business, even once you make a decision, there's still part of you that says, we'll have to wait to see how the data unfolds before we know for sure if this was the right direction. And so
Yeah,
that we sometimes carry with us, even into a decision, a little bit of uncertainty. So what we want to do is temporarily suspend the lack of decision once we've made a clear decision and say, once we get this much data or this far into this project, then we'll reevaluate. But until then, we're going to just turn off the part of you that's debating this, and we're going to put your head down and just go for it, because that's when you start to make rapid progress and speed starts to be your ally instead of something holding you back.
it makes sense. There's something I heard a while back that I think feels like it fits here. Is essentially to always have your buyer's remorse before you make the decision. And so then I like what you're saying. You basically, there's no reason to sit there and worry about it until you get the data in anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
stress about the decision as much as you need to make the right one or get on the right path, and then
Yeah.
kind of let it go and trust that it'll work out or it won't, and you'll figure it out then. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, I would say I would take it one step beyond that and say actually create a system for evaluating your decisions so that it's not just sort of when I feel uncertain again, but rather you know in advance that we're going to go until we have this piece that was unknown. It's a bit of a question mark on your roadmap. So we're trying to get from point A to point B, but we don't know what's going to happen here. It's a little bit like driving in the fog. Until you get to that next spot, you can't really see. But once you're there, you can have clear vision of what to do. And so if you have a systematic way of doing that, your speed of making decisions will increase. As a result, your certainty will increase. And as a result of that, your speed of progress will increase, not just for you, but for the teams that you're directing. And so then you'll accomplish more and you'll have the profits to show it.
That makes sense. I like that. What do you think that the biggest mistake most of, whether it's your clients or just what you see out in the world that entrepreneurs make when it comes to productivity and decision making? What is, and like, what is that kind of foundational shift that has to happen for them to get through that?
I would say I have kind of two answers to that question. The first one is more to the point of the foundational shift is that a lot of us don't isolate decision making as something that is real. We know it's happening, but we don't really address it purposefully. So the first foundational shift is to admit to yourself that there are decisions being made every day, whether it's by ignoring the decision that's being made, and so you're just going by default. It's sort of a decision that's being made by not making a decision, or by deciding like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But either way, decisions are happening about how you allocate your time, energy, attention, all the resources you have. You want to think of them as I'm placing my bets and I'm trying to stack the odds in favor of achieving what I'm going for. And so just realizing that you're always placing bets every time you step into your office, sit down at your computer, get to work, you're placing a bet on what gets your attention first, second, third, just within that workday, let alone which business project you're going to launch or whether we should hire a COO or a project manager to speed us up, whether we should allocate some ad spend to testing a new product idea or just deploy it where it's tried and true and we know we're making progress here. Those are all decisions that are about placing your bets for how you're going to try to stack the odds in your favor. So that's the foundational shift is just to realize that decisions are happening. And so you should build a system for yourself for capturing what are the decisions that we're making and including the ones that just by avoidance you're making. Like if you find yourself avoiding um, terminating somebody who's really not been showing up and doing what they need to do, but you're avoiding it because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, or you're just not sure yet. Well, that in itself is a decision, right? So that's the first foundational shift. But if I was going to answer kind of the first part of that question, what's the most important change or shift or mistake that people make when making decisions? It's that entrepreneurs spend a lot of time placing bets that have high upside, and they do so without considering the downside risk. And so what you want to do is change the decisions that you even let yourself see as options so that you spend a lot more of your time making only including options that have high upside asymmetry relative to a low downside risk, because that allows you to roll the dice over and over again, and you can be wrong. You can afford to be wrong because the downside risk is capped and it's small enough that you still have plenty of room in terms of mind share and cost, expenses, actual cash layout, team time. You have the chance to then pivot and try the next roll the dice again. And eventually, one of them goes in your favor. And that's where the high upside causes you to make years of progress in a very short period of time, a few months. And people might look at you and say, well, you were just in the right place at the right time. You got lucky. But in reality, you engineered your approach that way on purpose so that the bets that you're placing are the ones that have the high upside and the risk is low. And so it looks to others like you just were in the right place at the right time or you got lucky, but you actually engineered that on purpose. So then the question that people naturally should be asking me, and they do when I present this is, well, that sounds really nice, Todd, but in business, that's not the reality. There's downside risk. And so that gets us to the topic of how to actually insist on optionality. So optionality is like a compass that I encourage entrepreneurs to use when making decisions. And what I mean by that is like, let's say, Ben, you had a service that you were offering to me, and I was thinking about accepting this, and you said it's a 2-year agreement, and it's $14,000 per month. It will do these services for you, and this comes with these aspects of consulting or whatever. And I'm thinking like, yes or no, should I do that or not? Well, right now the way it's been positioned is there's quite a lot of downside risk. There's $14,000 a month times, 24 months is the downside risk plus the opportunity cost of having put that money elsewhere or the time if it ends up not being effective. Yes, there's still a lot of upside of whatever it is the benefit or the promise of that service is, but what we want to do is insist on optionality. So we say, okay, which option gives us the most optionality here? Saying yes or no, and that's creating a false dichotomy. So what research has shown us is that the number one decision we make, the number one decision error that we humans are prone to is dichotomous thinking when we're faced with an important decision. We tend to think black or white, yes or no, all or nothing. And what we want to do is say, I bet there's a bunch of options in here that if I push myself to brainstorm, what if? How could I have the upside with less of the downside? Almost in any situation, if we look for that, we'll find a way. So I might come back to you and say, Ben, it's too much of a risk to our business for me to say yes the way you've proposed it. But what if we did a 3-month trial and we say, well, we'll pay you $10,000 extra to give us that chance to do that above and beyond your normal fee? Because what we want is to be able to make sure that this is the right choice for us. And you say, you know what, that's not our typical method, but we'd like to work with your company. Let's do it. Now I've created the optionality to where the downside risk has been shrunk a lot, and we still have all the upside potential of if Ben's agency or service ends up being as good or way better than we thought, we get to skyrocket with that success. And if we're wrong, well, we only lost, 3 months or so of cost. And then it gives us the option to pivot to someone else's agency or service or go back to doing something, building an internal method to accomplish the same thing. And we have that cash flow and the time to be able to pivot if we need to. So imagine that you did that. That's like just a micro example. But imagine you did that like 15, 20, 30 times across the course of a year. Think of how many times, how much more optionality, how many more opportunities you have to be right and have the benefit of the upside and not be stuck with decisions that you unfortunately were wrong about. So here's the thing that a lot of people in like the personal development space like to talk about, having optimism and sort of abundance mindset, which are wonderful. There's no doubt it helps. But then sometimes they go a step further and they say you need to visualize success and only visualize success. And you need to essentially use like a law of attraction sort of mindset to only think good things are going to happen. The problem with that is that it actually doesn't usually stack the odds in your favor, except for on the psychological side. Psychologically that is useful, right? Because somebody who gets turned down for 10 jobs in a row, who has an abundance mindset and is making an affirmation of I will find the right job, they just keep trying long enough till they eventually succeed. So it does benefit us in that way. But with complex decisions that business owners make, we have to acknowledge the ways that we can be wrong. And so one of the other strategies or successful principles for decision making is to prepare to be wrong. This is something that the Heath brothers talk about in a book they wrote about decision making. That's one of their steps is to prepare to be wrong in advance. Some people in the business world have called this a pre-mortem, as opposed to a post-mortem after something's already died, and then you're trying to analyze what was the cause of death. Instead, you say, okay, here's the decision we're leaning toward. But if it was going to fail, if this turned out to be the wrong decision, what's the most likely cause? And then you do this pre-mortem analysis and you say, it's probably going to be that we're too busy and we don't allocate enough team members. We waste the opportunity with Ben, and then we never really get the full extent of the benefit. And so that helps us to then prepare and actually sidestep some of the things that could have caused us to do poorly. And it's not negative thinking. What we're doing is we're trying to stack the odds in our favor by building a rich mental simulation of the future. And the richer that mental simulation is, the easier it is for us to sidestep the obstacles and get more of what we want in the process and the journey.
That makes so much sense. If you're just constantly thinking about sunshine and rainbows, you're not going to be ready for the war that comes because that's what we're all dealing with, right?
Right. Would it be possible, Ben, for me to share an image on my screen if I just did a quick screen share, or is
I
that
would love
to
that.
mess up
Yeah.
your systems?
No, by
All
all
right.
means.
Let me just share this really quick here. Try to move some things out of the way because this visual image often helps people to really grasp what I'm saying. This this image here represents what I'm talking about when it comes to placing your bets. This is the target over here, where the upside potential, everything above this black line, this is what we're going for. And we want very low downside risk. What I find most entrepreneurs live in this space where we want to eliminate these kinds of options from your plate, where yes, there's quite a bit of upside, but there's also a lot of downside. And so our tendency, the people who tend to get into entrepreneurship, just by nature, you tend to be optimists. You tend to be a little bit more impulsive and willing to take risks. As a result, you put yourself in these positions where three options fall on your plate, and you look at them, you evaluate them all, and you're saying, "I'm trying to be productive. If I want to be productive, I have to just choose one of these and go for it." And what I'm saying is, when that happens, say no to all three and say, I insist on upside asymmetry and optionality. And so you wait a few weeks and then something falls in your lap that's more in this target zone over here. And now suddenly you're in a position where you have the money and the time, the resources, because you haven't already committed to the other three that were just kind of, you know, mediocre bets. Now you have the energy and time and money to go after the one that has really high upside asymmetry. And that's where you get this effect where people say, oh, Ben was just in the right place at the right time. He got lucky. But in reality, it's because you waited for that moment, for this right opportunity to come along. And what would have happened if you had just taken one of the three opportunities right in front of you? You would have worked hard, you would have felt productive, but you would have missed the really good opportunity that came along because now all your team and resources are allocated and you're like, I don't even have time. That's if you even noticed it because you're so busy trying to implement these things on this other side. So that's the concept in a nutshell that is so simple and it's intuitive. And when we see that, we're like, oh, of course, that's what we want. But we lack a systematic way of looking at our decisions and evaluating, are we stacking the odds in our favor on purpose in a way that gives us an advantage as entrepreneurs?
I really like that, and I appreciate you sharing that graph. To me, I can almost envision faces on that graph, and there's like on the left side, it's like the majority of first-time entrepreneurs and those that are just kind of still trying to figure it out. And then on the right side, you have the titans of industry that we think about, the Elons that, yeah, you can buy a platform for 44 billion, but not spend any of your own actual money. And so
Mm.
the people thought it was crazy, but as you were saying that, I was just thinking of all of these. I love reading the autobiographies of entrepreneurs just because that's essentially what they talk about is how they mitigate the risk and were able to take the big swings that, I mean, most of us just wouldn't because, we don't know how to avoid that. So yeah, that was super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, okay, when it comes to business ownership, we've already kind of alluded to the fact that there's kind of a never ending to-do list, right? So assuming that the asymmetric risk is lower than the upside, how do you decide where to start? What's the framework to figure out what to focus on?
Yeah. Well, my hierarchy of productivity needs starts with removing overwhelm. So that's the first question. If you're so overwhelmed that you can't keep up with everything on your plate right now, then that's our first order of business. So the to-do list items, we start crossing out as many as we can, ones that probably some of them you're like, no, I can't cross that one off. But when you look at it through the lens of, yeah, but you're not intelligent as an entrepreneur, you're not living up to your potential as a person who thinks for a living if you're so overwhelmed that you don't even have time to think in the first place. So we have to eliminate that. We have to stop you from working 16-hour days and rushing through and having just brain fog because you can't even think because you've just been going so hard for so long and you're dealing with the stress load, carrying that stress load along the way that diminishes your cognitive resources even further. We have to eliminate that problem. And so that's why we start with removing overwhelm. And of course, that's easier said than done. But when it comes to deciding what to do first on your to-do list, you're gonna start to prioritize the things that buy back your time. So we're gonna make those, if we're gonna do a progress task, not just a maintenance task, something just to maintain your cash flow and your business operations, and we're just looking at the list of things that you want to do to improve, we're going to prioritize the things that have the potential to pay you back with dividends of time saving on a recurring basis. So one of the things that we do is an analysis of, well, where is your time going? Let's list all the things that are recurring, all the things that suck up your time, including like putting out fires, which is a big one for many entrepreneurs. You have systems that mostly work, but then when something breaks, all your systems crash and you just end up, um, rushing to try to barely get done what has to get done. What we try to do is reduce the number of crashes and fires that come up so that you have fewer of those and buy back time so that you actually have space in your schedule to deal with the fires. And so this is probably the most counterintuitive thing that I say to entrepreneurs that when I first say a lot of people look at me skeptically, but I've found from working with many entrepreneurs over many years with lots of decisions that this plays out in their favor is that I ask you to work at 80% of your true capacity, not the 110% that most entrepreneurs are pushing for. It's exciting to say like I want to be like David Goggins level of self-discipline and focus and effort, and to some degree you need to, but you just need to do it in an intelligent way. So why in the world would I say work at 80% of your capacity if my whole thing is I'm going to help you, achieve your goals faster? And the answer is because what's the very first thing that goes out the window when when your systems break and everything falls apart, an employee quits, now you have to do their job and yours. And what happens is the very first thing that you throw out the window is slowing down to prioritize, think, and plan. And that's the very last thing that should be going out the window, right? Because that's what makes you smart. That's what allows you to do the few things that actually matter instead of rushing around and just doing everything. And then you get to the end of the day and you didn't do the most important stuff and you start losing ground. And so by working at 80% of your capacity, now when something breaks or you just need some time to refresh and recover, you have that capacity because you haven't filled your entire day with stuff that you have to do. And so part of the process that I walk entrepreneurs through who are ready and their cash flow is in a position where they can afford to start investing and bringing people in and either delegating or outsourcing certain things that were taking up their time. One of the things that we start doing as soon as possible is figuring out how can we do those asymmetric bets for the task of taking things off your plate so that if it works, it really works and we get all the upside. But if it doesn't work, we don't lose too much time. Like hiring someone to be your COO and you train them for 3 months and it turns out it just didn't work. And you promised them a big salary and now there's severance and now you have to start over. And if you've lost a lot, we try to reduce that and try to find the 80/20 low-hanging fruit opportunities to start getting back some of your time that then you can use to think and plan, make even better asymmetric bets to get a little bit more of your time. So that's the first thing is we're trying to remove overwhelm. And then the next thing to answer that question of, well, how do you know what to do first, second, third, is that we're going to make sure that you have a clear path forward. So do you know where you're going? And if not, we're going to focus as much of our attention as we can just on that one question. Are you sure you have a decision? even if it's just like we said, until we get to the question mark and we get the data that shows us what to do next. Are you at least certain about that part? And once you're certain about that, the next question becomes, do you have a plan to get there? And a lot of entrepreneurs just kind of wing it. Business owners think, I'm just going to, I kind of have it in my head. I know the general path, but I encourage people, if you get to that step, the next most important thing for you to do is to create some sort of OKR. Like Google has used from when they were operating in a garage, and they still use it today. It's what the creators of LinkedIn use to generate their whole systems and process for choosing what to do when. And for anyone who may be listening that is not familiar, OKR just stands for objective and key result. So you just say, here's the objective, and we might have one, two, or three for the quarter, and then one for the year. And then here are the key results, those measurable results that you'd say, if we achieve these two or three key results, then that means we've achieved the objective. And then underneath that becomes each key result has a set of key initiatives that are assigned to specific people that own that initiative. Those are the things you can actually do. The leading indicators that lead to the lagging indicators, the objectives and the key results that we actually care about. So that process is, of course, iterative because it's going to change. So that becomes a document that guides your behavior. See, when you start your workday, you're not just going by the seat of your pants and trying to wing it. You're looking and saying, we set our top objective is this. We're this far, like 20% to achieving this key result. Here's the three things in logical sequence order that we are already decided when we slowed down to think. This is the best way to approach it. We're not going to start working on item 2 and 3 until number 1 is finished. And then the question becomes, what's the constraint? So then we get into theory of constraints. And I don't want to go on too long of a monologue here explaining that for people that are not familiar with it, but basically it's looking for the bottleneck, figuring out, well, what's the thing that's slowing us down, preventing us from making the progress that we want to, and then trying to focus the attention of your effort like a laser on that one thing where it's going to have the biggest impact on collapsing the time it takes to reach your goals, instead of diffusing your attention across trying to do lots of things and you're just rushing around answering Slack questions all day with your team. And then you get to the end of the week and you're like, what did I do? I know I worked hard all week, but I can't really point to any progress we made. So if I could, Ben, make one more addition to flesh this out
Yeah.
before we go to your next thought or question, because I feel like if I just leave it at that, there's still a gap here that in real life, rubber meets the road entrepreneurship, people say, wait a minute, there's a problem here. And that
Yeah.
is that I didn't mention yet the maintenance tasks. So those are the things that you just have to do to keep the lights on, the things that the systems you've already built. And so I encourage people to have two separate lists, a maintenance task list and a progress task list, and keep them separate. A lot of people just blend them together. And that is one of the reasons we get to the end of the week and we feel like, I know I tried hard, but what did I do? Is because we didn't clearly differentiate those two. So the maintenance tasks, those are things like if the credit card needs to be paid off so that your ad spend doesn't stop on Facebook, well, then get that done. That's one of your maintenance tasks. If you need to approve payroll so your team gets paid, people stay motivated and keep showing up to work, that's a maintenance task. It just has to be done to keep the lights on. And instead of saving those for the last minute or having them sprinkled throughout your day where you're jumping between tasks, what we want to do is take that list and we want to compress it into a repeatable sequence that if this has to be done today, I do it. If not, it's not one of those days. I go to the next one and the next one. What it does is it reduces decision fatigue to have a very clear list of items that you're going to tackle and in what priority order, because you're not trying to redecide like what's the most important thing to do. And then we try to time box that and put it like maybe you need like 2 hours for this kind of work, Tuesday and a Thursday. And maybe we put it during your lower energy time so that we can keep your highest, best creative work for your progress tasks. That other list. These are the things that don't exist yet, but you want them to. A new hire or a new system that makes everything more efficient or a new offer that you're bringing to the world. So those are two separate lists. And we can't pretend that the maintenance task list doesn't exist, or else you repeatedly find yourself back in this overwhelmed state again, instead of having a systematized way of shrinking that down and then figuring out which things to add to your progress task list to get these things off your plate on your maintenance task list, if that makes sense.
It does. It really brought up two big things for me because I like it a lot. I used to have a general manager 15 years ago or so that he was one of those guys that was just full of all the knowledge in the world, but really wasn't the best in the world at communicating it. And so as life goes on, I'm like, that's what he meant. That's what he was trying to get across. And I feel like one of the things that he was really big on was, hey, get all of the work that you hate to do. Again, probably not the right terminology, but get the things that you have to do done first so that they're not weighing on your mind throughout the day of like, I still got to get to that. You could just be fully present in what you were doing thereafter because all the hard stuff was gone. Is that is that similar to what you're saying? Obviously, he used harsh words about what you hate as opposed to just what maintenance is, but is that the same kind of mentality then?
It's related but separate. Like, that's what
Okay.
some people call eat that frog
Yeah, yeah, very
method,
so yeah.
where the core thing that some people miss about why eat that frog works and why it can be a part of what I'm saying is that if you don't do the thing that you're really not looking forward to, the thing that you dread, then you subconsciously slow down to avoid getting to that item on your task list.
Sure.
And people deny that they would do this, but it's been shown that we actually do that. It's like if we have to make a difficult call and it's going to be very uncomfortable, we don't want to do it, and we know that's in the afternoon, we'll actually, or we know it's on, the fifth thing on our list. Those first four things will go slower because we don't want to get to it. And so Eat That Frog says, get it done first. And now you have your energy is going uphill. Your motivation and drive for the rest of the day is higher because you're not trying to avoid getting to the next thing on your list. So it's separate but related.
Okay.
So it's like an augmentation of what I was talking about versus the core of the reason to create a maintenance task list and to consolidate it is to reduce task switching, which of all the things that's been researched in the field of productivity, that's one that we have some of the most robust data that says it does not work. Like jumping back and forth, it just slows down how much uh, everything basically goes slower, and we think that we're better at it than we are. It's partly that, and it's partly so that you reduce the overwhelm because you actually do get it done. And so then it creates that mental freedom that you talked about, where you can be more energized and creative because the things are finished. And it's also partly so that you can be honest with yourself and see clearly how much of your time is required just to keep running on the hamster wheel, because a lot of people underestimate that. They look at it and they think that they have, 20 hours a week to work on progress tasks. And so when they're feeling high energy and excited, they work on that. And then they get to the end of the day or towards the end of the week, and there's stuff that just has to get done that hasn't yet. And they feel pressed for time. And then they start making worse decisions as they try to get everything done. And so it forces realism in the same way that time boxing your whole week forces you to prioritize what matters because you realize it doesn't all fit. When you say
Right.
this is a 20-minute task, that's an hour-long meeting, this is a 30-minute process, and then you're like 60% of the way through of dragging your tasks on your calendar, you realize it doesn't fit. Most that doesn't actually help you with productivity, except that it shows you that you have to cut some things. And if you do that in advance, you're more likely to do the stuff that really matters, that's going to have a high consequence, good or bad, and put off the things that can be delayed or that have a very small impact if you just never get to them.
Okay, that makes sense. So to kind of bring this into another visual that I think a lot of people are familiar with, how does this idea of the two lists and really creating that system to make sure you get them done, how does that really relate to this idea of the big rocks? We've all seen the big rocks in the jar, right? How does it relate to that, and what are some of the differences?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what I'm talking about, it can live in the same world where someone says, I need to get the big rocks done first, the important needle moving work. I need to put that early in the day before I start checking messages. There's a reason why that works because you're less distracted and you've got clear mental space to get some stuff done. You're making at least some needle moving work during every week, and so it's easier to point to progress, right? Here's the problem with that. That was, Stephen Covey popularized that concept early on, doing this demonstration where you have the beaker, and if you put the water and the sand and then the gravel in first, then you try to fit the big rocks and they just don't fit. And it's a cool visual analogy, but it neglects something super important, which is that if you're considering the smaller rocks, the maintenance tasks, if those don't get done, then everything collapses and you're starting at zero again. You have no business, or you've lost customers because you didn't reply to their inquiries.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm an advertising agency and my clients are saying, "Hey, we need that report," and you didn't do the report because you were doing just your big rocks and it was fun and exciting. Now, instead of going from 100,000 MRR and now you've dropped to 80,000 because you've had some clients that left, you've actually slowed yourself down at achieving your big rock objectives that you needed cash flow for, where that can create that snowball effect where you can essentially hire in more productive output than you could have achieved on your own with that cash flow. That's what creates that ability to be more productive than just your own 24 hours allows. You've actually gone backwards. And so what I say to people is that you're actually better off prioritizing and creating the space for your maintenance tasks first, then you know how much realistically progress time you have. And our goal is if you think of your total work week as a pie chart and you're going to think of it as like what percentage is maintenance tasks, what percentage is progress tasks. Our goal for the long term is that we're going to shrink the part that's maintenance tasks so that most of your time as an entrepreneur is spent uh, playing the thinking game and hiring people and doing things that are high leverage, the working on the business stuff. But if we start with just saying we're going to do that, we're going to neglect the maintenance task, you end up achieving that slower, right? It actually sets you back instead of helping you move forward. So instead, we want to start by being realistic and saying, what do you actually have on your plate? Then we can look at those things and ask the question, which of them can we remove by delegating, automating, deleting, or outsourcing in some way? And then gradually those are your progress tasks is to build the systems to get stuff off your maintenance task list so that that part of the pie shrinks and becomes smaller and smaller. Now 90% of your work week is building new stuff. That's where we're trying to get you to as soon as possible.
I love that. Yeah, earlier you clarified because you felt that if we didn't, that people would be left off. And I feel like for years, anyone I've ever talked to about Big Rocks, that's where they were. They were like, yeah, I've heard it, but it doesn't quite sit right. And so I appreciate you clarifying that. I agree wholeheartedly, although I will admit I don't think I've thought about it nearly as deeply as you have. So I think that helps make it make sense though, because just because something is popular information doesn't actually mean it's going to get you where you need to go in the best or fastest way. So yeah,
Right.
okay. So we're in a weird time, and we've kind of touched about that where things are moving fast. Technology is insane at this point, and I'm I'm getting the feeling from the entrepreneurs that I speak with that they feel both more lost, but also more supercharged than ever. And so, with that being said, most entrepreneurs have some level of confidence that they can do things that others don't. But now there's all these tools. So what if somebody's trying to be a Da Vinci and do a million different things? How is it that you bring them into focusing on just the one thing and kind of cutting off some of those other options, especially when it feels like a buffet. Anybody could go anywhere and build or do anything at this point. But how do you get them to focus on the one thing that matters?
Yeah. I mean, really the essence of what you're asking, the way I'm interpreting it is how do you get yourself to do the right thing in the right order, right? Because you can only split your attention so many ways, and usually that's one, right? One thing can actually get your attention at a time. And so then the question becomes, what do you focus on first in order to achieve your goal? And so the most important thing that you can do as an entrepreneur is be very clear about what you're trying to accomplish first, the end goal, not all the mechanisms and the methods that you'll use to get there, but the end goal that you're trying to achieve. And that could be something as simple as just like saying, I'm trying to stack up a $10 million cash reserve, or it could be something more complex, like we're trying to become the hub for all creative strategy for building um, movies or something like we want to be the best of the best at that. But whatever it is, you want to be clear about what that end goal is. Because when we're trying to figure out, well, what's the formula that will get us there fastest? If that's just a question mark over there, or it's kind of like, you know, why times Z equals, and then it's like N or M or O, and we're not really sure what that is. How can we solve for one side of the equation if we don't know what it's trying to solve for? And so get really clear about where are we actually trying to go? And then you want to ask yourself of all the various things on your plate, all these opportunities that you have, are they moving me closer to my goal or potentially moving me further away? And for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially right now with AI opening up possibilities, the trap that a lot of people are falling into is they're spending a lot of time on things that actually move them a little bit further away from their goal because they think I'm getting behind, other people are using this or that cool tool, and if I don't, I'm going to fall behind. They're going to achieve things faster than me. There's truth to that, but what we have to do is be very selective about which of those things have the highest probability, again, coming back to the asymmetric bets, which ones can I test quickly and I can see very soon that building that AI automation is going to actually, within just 3 hours of coding with Claude Cowork or Claude Code, is going to start yielding something that we can use versus this is a 3 month project and by the time we finish, it's irrelevant because now Claude just released something that does that for you. And so a lot of people are getting stuck in spinning their wheels, like trying little things a lot. And then if we look at the aggregate impact of where they put their time, it just caused them to go on a detour with very little to show for it in terms of moving closer to their goal. So get clear about what the goal is, then look at the options, and we want to rank those based on like time commitment and risk and dollars that it takes to test that relative to the total impact if we're right and it really does benefit us and move us closer to the goal. And then we can look at that equation and say, yes, this combination in this order is the smartest way to go for now based on the data that we have at this moment. And because things are iterating and changing so fast right now, we now are in a position where we have to slow down to do this decision analysis more frequently than people had to do 20 years ago, where you could set out to build a company and not that much is going to be different in terms of the environment that your company is working in 5 years later. But right now, as I'm sure you know, we're in a position where it's hard to see what the world's going to look like in 5 years. And so again, we've got to prioritize the methods and the focus areas that have the most optionality so that we don't have to perfectly see what the world is going to look like in 5 years to still be right, to still be able to switch or pivot in a way that causes us to look as if we saw the future coming when really we just put ourselves in a position to where we didn't have to be right. We didn't have to be able to perfectly predict it in order to be in the right position to achieve the goal that we're going for.
Wow, we didn't have to be right. I really like that. I really like that. Okay, so I know we're running short on time, but I have three more questions for you, and two of them will be real quick. So
All
the
right.
first one, if you're willing to share, what was that book that you picked up?
Well, so this is a book that probably these days is not the best place to start, but it just sparked for me the fascination with the world of psychology. And it was The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. Very old book. The author is no longer living, but he just had a way of telling stories and explaining simple things like if you take a certain phrase from like scripture in the Bible and put it in your pocket and your hand feels that and it says, I will rise up on wings as an eagle, and that inspires you with feelings of confidence and energy instead of fatigue and fear. That for like a professional baseball player could be the difference between showing up as the best version of themselves versus someone that's kind of timid, weak, and scared. And it's just those repeated reprogramming of those scripts playing in your head. So Norman Vincent Peale, not even a psychologist, just a gifted author with some deep insights. But that was the spark for me.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. And just my team already knows this. I'm going to be searching for it as soon as I get done and see if I can add it to the list. Okay, so one question we always like to ask everyone is if somebody's watching this, whether live or recording, and they are inspired to take action, what would be the first most important action that they could take after this masterclass to actually see some kind of increase or just overall better satisfaction with the way that they're working?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of things that we've covered here, and I'm tempted to say like it's divide your task list into progress versus maintenance and or time box some space, but it's actually something I haven't mentioned yet that I would say is a good starting point, which is just to create a weekly reminder to yourself. And I recommend you use some sort of app that literally like pings you, makes a noise, and you schedule it for a time when you're not likely to be in the middle of a meeting or busy with something to where you ignore it. And if you need to, make it a different app or reminder than your typical one. So if you get used to like hearing a little ping and it's like, oh, that's my reminder to do the next thing on my task list, we want it to be a different sound, something on your watch or your phone or app on your computer, something that's going to remind you to do an analysis of the decisions that you've made in the past week and the decisions that need to be made in order to reduce uncertainty and to increase your sense of certainty for the next sprint. And so it's got two pieces. What decisions do I need to make that if I just leave them unmade, I'm just kind of drifting. I'm not using my full potential as a human with a mind that can look into the future. And then the part about analyzing or just sort of rating the decisions you made in the past week, again, it's to increase your awareness during the week. Anything you rate, if you give yourself a score of 1 to 10, how well did I do at decisions this week? Just the action of thinking that through and giving yourself a rating, it increases your awareness of whatever it is you're rating, right? Just like, some of the apps for counting calories for people who are trying to lose weight. It's not that writing the number in there changed what you weigh. It's that that increases your awareness the next time you're about to eat something, right? And so what it does is it makes you more aware of decisions and it causes you to increase the emphasis and the importance you put on slowing down to think at those moments and think, wait, this is where I make my money, is in these moments where I'm deciding how to place my bets about what I'm going to do next. And part of that self-analysis that I would encourage you to do at least weekly is to ask yourself, what decisions did I make without even realizing that it was a decision? So a common category for this is I spent 2 hours scrolling YouTube and just watching shorts on Instagram or something. And you don't remember making a decision to do that, but you did make a decision for that to grab your attention and to get sucked into it. So it's an opportunity to just keep improving, where you say, okay, I see the flaw I made there is I thought I would be able to just look for those two videos and then quit, but my brain got hijacked by these algorithms that are designed to, feed me little dopamine spikes. And so next time I need to set a countdown timer for 15 minutes before I go look on YouTube for that one thing I needed to go get information from. That way I have something that pulls me out of that um, little trance that we get pulled into. So it's just asking yourself, what decisions did I never even think of it as a decision, but it was there, and just spending a minute or two thinking about the past 7 days will cause your decision-making skills to get better.
Is that something that should just be thought? Is that should be written down, journaled? Like, how do you usually
Yeah,
recommend that?
I recommend you just write 2 or 3 prompts to yourself, even though you can easily remember them. But just like number one, what decisions you might tell yourself, list 3 decisions that you're going to be making in the next 7 to 14 days. And then the next prompt is rate yourself on the decisions that you made in the past week. And then the next prompt is what decisions did you make unconsciously or without even realizing in the past week? And then just having it written like that prevents your mind from wandering or drifting, so to where you started thinking about decisions and the next thing you know you're thinking about whether you should break up with your girlfriend. You spent 30 minutes thinking about that, but you didn't really do the exercise,
Yeah.
right? You kind of did one little tiny piece of it. So I do think writing yourself a little prompt, if it's like a calendar reminder, time box, on a Saturday morning or something, to have 5 or 10 minutes for this, and just write those prompts directly into the description of your calendar event so that it's easy to pull up and work off of that. Alternatively, you could make yourself a Google Doc or something similar that gets sent to you in your own Slack channel or something. And that's your prompt, and you go through. And it's interesting then if you capture that data to go back and look at the aggregate inputs that you've put and see how you're improving and opportunities to get even better.
Can I just clarify that for a sec? Because I want to make sure that I understand it or and that everyone understands it right. Because of some of the language, this sounds crazy to even have to bring up, but in 2026, we're talking about this being an actual human thought process, not them turning to their chat GPT they use every day and say, what decisions did I make?
Right.
Correct? Okay.
That's that's correct. I mean, I have a few clients that literally are using all day communication with AI to structure their workday. I don't recommend it because of some of the weaknesses the AI has, and it doesn't technically have a mental model of the world like a human does. But for them, maybe that would work because they're literally putting every decision in there. But no, I'm talking about doing something to trigger your human brain to not pass more than 7 days without practicing the skill that's more than anything else can determine your success in business, which is decision making.
I love that. Okay. Final question then. How do people get in touch with you? I know that there's going to be people that need to work on their productivity, need to focus on their goals, and really need to. I mean, we've covered a lot here and really want to dive in deeper with you on that. So, how would somebody get in touch with you? What's the best method there?
Yeah, the best way to either just consume some of the articles I write, or if you want to reach out and talk about decision making strategies or productivity, is just to go to my website. It's toddsnydercoaching.com. Snyder is how my last name is spelled. And if you go there, there's a place if you want to just opt in for some email newsletters, or set up a time to talk about these things.
Awesome. All right. Well, Todd, thank you so much for being here. I know that we've had this on the calendar for a while, and this is one that my team, if they were not on mute right now, they would tell you how excited I've been to actually get a chance to talk with you. So I'm very, very honored that you were here, and I hope that we could have you come back at some time. Is there anything else that you want to send as a going away to our audience here?
Yeah, I would just say to remember that what separates you as a human from the animal kingdom is your ability to generate a rich mental simulation of the future. And I would just want to ask you to use it more purposefully and to really lean into that skill because that's what's going to make all the difference. And thank you, Ben. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and people in your audience. I appreciate and respect the work that you do.
Thanks so much. Okay, everybody, if you have questions, comments, concerns, if you want to push back on anything that we talked about today, feel free to use the comments below this video. Or if you're already a member of our mastermind community, please bring this conversation into there. We can dive deep into your productivity. We can get into your goal setting, and we will do our best to cover anything that Todd has talked about. And then we will absolutely kick you over to him if it's beyond, which let's face it, your depth is well beyond what we're covering. But bring everything in and we will dive in at least as far as it impacts what we can cover. And so I hope that everybody takes this information and not only thinks of it in just a simple mindset. It's not just a mindset exercise. This is how you actually make meaningful impact in your life, in your relationships, in your business, is just slowing down, being present, thinking through things. And so I hope that this time has not only sparked some ideas, but provided you some clarity so that you can go forward and you can do more and you can sell more. And that's it. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. We will see you on the next one.